Hey, it's Kate Gunning, CMO Show host, and I'm so excited and honored to have John Ellett with me today. He is the author of the CMO Manifesto. If I were to put him in the brand archetype wheel, he would be a sage. He's got tons of amazing, timeless advice, and I know you'll enjoy what he's got to say. So listen in and enjoy. Hey, it's Kate, and you're watching and listening to the CMO Show with Kate Gunning. And I am really pumped for our guest today. It's John Ellett. He is the author of the CMO Manifesto, and he's got the most incredible, timeless tips for CMOs and aspiring ones. And I actually can't believe that I get the honor of sitting here with you right now and interviewing you.
Well, I feel like it's my honor to be part of the CMO Show, so thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming and spending your time with us today. We really appreciate it. And I know our listeners will be so grateful for your advice as well. So it's like opening up the book and talking to you live 10 years after you've published the book. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And before we came on air, you were sharing with me that you thought about writing another one, and then you scrapped that because the tips that are in here are timeless and they have proven themselves to be over the last decade. So I'd love it if you could start by just sharing some of your favorite timeless tips that you feature in your book.
Well, thanks.
Yeah.
I think one of them that I keep reflecting back on is kind of the first chapter. How do you get off to a fast start? And I ended up writing the book at a time when the CMO tenure was at its absolute lowest, and I had several friends that were in the process of taking on new CMO roles, and it's like, how can I help them? Right?
Yeah.
And let me find the book on how to help a CMO get off to a fast start, and it turns out it didn't exist. So I thought maybe this would be something I could contribute to the CMO, my tribe, the CMO community, and so I set out to pick the brains of, it turned out to be about 50 really great CMOs from all different types of industries and experiences. And, through that, was able to kind of derive how they went about it and what were their tips. And so one of the first ones that I think is so key to success is aligning expectations on the role. And so much turnover is because there was misalignment. And how do you make sure, you're aligned with your boss, typically the CEO, on what to expect and what am I accountable for and what do we want to do together? Then getting that alignment with your C-suite peers. Change doesn't happen on its own or as a solo practitioner. You need a team, and spend time with aligning and building relationships across your counterparts. Because at the end of the day, you're going to need everybody to be on the same page for whatever strategies you develop to actually work. And the other is, spend the first 30 days, with more ears and less mouth, and take time to listen. And because you only get to be a kind of newbie once. And so take time to ask lots of questions. They can be stupid questions. They won't be, but they'll be, I'll say naive questions, or the opportunity to have challenging questions. Like, I'm new here. Why did we do it that way? Or, and that opportunity to really inform what the future strategy is going to be by taking time to listen, to build your bridges with your counterparts, and make sure that you're aligned with your CEO at the outset, and that'll set the foundation for some success.
Would you like to share any timeless tips that you've come across that aren't featured in your book, but that you feel like, ooh, I wish that one was in there?
I was fortunate to get a lot of that built in, but I think one that has emerged that probably wasn't codified here is how important it is to stay curious and stay up to date. And one of the reasons that the second book I was going to write on modern marketing, I shelved was things were just moving so fast that I figured by the time I got it written,
Yeah.
it would be out of date. And so I think this idea of curiosity and staying fresh and learning. I love the idea of reverse mentoring. For me, that was always really helpful. And, having folks who are on some of the new platforms, share how they use it and teach you, why it's good and what it's not about, and help bring in that connection with younger talent to help learn new and different things. And that's one that notion of curiosity, I think, is an attribute that great CMOs have. And so how do you continue to nurture that?
That's a good one. And reverse mentoring is a really good one too. And so I just want to say to our listeners, if you are a little further along in your career and you have reverse mentor suggestions for people who you have mentored over the course of your career, who are super up with new terms, technologies, themes, whatever it may be, please share, because we want to gather those resources too. I know I personally, in the last year, I've looked to my network a lot to learn about Web3 as an example. And one woman, I have to call her a woman now, even though she started working for me right out of college. But one woman has spent a lot of time learning about Web3 and building a lot of really interesting thought leadership around it. So I pay her to teach me.
Absolutely.
I'm like, dude, no pride here. Please help. Yeah. So I love that tip. And I think that we can really leverage that to, create some tangible help for our Team CMO community. So thank you for adding that. That's awesome. Okay. So we always ask everyone what their favorite book is. And we've just highlighted a little bit about what I assume your favorite book is.
I'm a little biased. Yeah.
How about tell our listeners, if you think about looking to people in the marketing industry, are there particular people or authors or that you have looked to for sage advice, or a network of people who you think?
One of my favorite authors is David Ocker. I thought was the best at articulating the essence of a good brand strategy. So as I was growing up in doing that work inside companies, I found him to be the most cogent in terms of the way he thought about it. And then when our agency got acquired by Profit, he is the vice chair of Profit. And so to consider David a colleague was really fun. And one of the highlights of my career was I took some of my books out to the San Francisco office where he is. And there's a big bookshelf on the lobby going into the office. And there's David's books and then my books next to David. And it's like, all right.
Oh, that's cool.
I felt like I'm next to my hero. So.
Oh, that's amazing. Wow, that's a big moment. Very special one.
It was fun.
Okay, so then how about we create a special moment for the CMO show? And we have a bookshelf right here. And we would be super honored if you want to put your book on our bookshelf. So I haven't authored a book, so I don't get the benefit of feeling the story that you just shared. But I will say that from now on, I will feel very honored to be able to sit next to your book and interview people. And thank you for adding to our shelf.
Thanks for letting me do that. That's
fun. We really appreciate it. So great. Okay, so you've talked to a lot of CMOs in your time, particularly when authoring the CMO Manifesto, and since, I would assume, and spent a lot of time working in brand strategy, as you mentioned. And I'm wondering, out of all the things that you've seen in terms of qualities that people have when they're in marketing, what's the one that you think is the most important?
Yeah, I think the most important attribute for marketing leaders, CMOs, is courage. I think it is a tough job. It takes determination and it takes perseverance. But if you're going to be a great CMO, inherent in that is being a change agent. The first tenet of the manifesto, CMO Manifesto, is I'm not here to be an agent, not here to maintain the status quo, but be the agent of change that my company needs. And so if you're going to be a change agent, you've got to have thick skin and you got to have courage. And so I think as I've seen the CMO community and those that do really well, they're ones that are brave and are willing to stick their necks out and have the courage to disrupt the status quo.
Mm-hmm. And I wonder what advice you might have for younger people in their CMO career who are maybe first time in the role, first time running a team, first time planning for a board meeting. It's like, can be so nerve-wracking for people. And it's like you mentally know you should be courageous, and then doing it is a whole nother ball game. Yeah. So what might you tell somebody if you're talking to them and it's the night before they start their first job as CMO ever?
Yeah. Don't feel like you've got to go it alone.
Mm-hmm.
It can be a very lonely role because you don't have anybody in your peer set that actually does what you do.
Yes. And they think that they do.
Yes. So you'll get lots of advice, but it can be a lonely role, and fight that tendency to feel like you've got to do it all on your own.
Yes.
Reach out for help, build the relationship with others, get advice from other members of the executive team that have been in front of the board, that know what to expect. Again, matching curiosity with courage, that ability to just ask questions, enroll people, get others to help you, and don't feel like you've got to do it all on your own.
That's great. And you don't know everything, right?
And be willing.
We can't possibly.
Exactly, and be willing to acknowledge that, mm-hmm. and don't feel like you got to fake it. Mm-hmm. It's just like, here's what I know, here's what I don't know. If I don't know something and it's important, let me find out somebody that does. And be vulnerable enough to ask for help.
That's great. So no isolating.
That's right. It's isolating enough. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, that's awesome. And I think a lot of people will appreciate just that validation. And I'm wondering too, if there are sort of along those lines, any tools or tech or things out in the world that you think are really important in terms of resources for CMOs?
I think there are some more communities for CMOs than there were 10 years ago.
Yes.
In lots of different forms. Some online communities, some weekly get-togethers, mm-hmm. Nationally, some local. And so I think the opportunity to easily reach out to others and get some advice, or, hey, I've got a question, exists in a much better form now than it did 10 years ago. And so take advantage of those opportunities because odds are somebody's had the question you're asking yourself, and if they've had a chance to answer it before, might as well take advantage of that shared collective wisdom.
Yeah, that's great. And speaking of community, I wonder, how do you fill your time now? And are you open to live chats, Q&As, sharing your knowledge with marketers, sort of off the cuff if needed? Do you still find yourself doing those kinds of things today?
I'd love to do that.
Yeah.
Before coming down here, I did a guest lecture at Boston University over Zoom.
Cool.
With one of my former Profit colleagues, and
mm-hmm.
He's now a professor of a digital marketing class, and so we did that Q&A. Mm-hmm. I love doing this kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I'm at that stage of life where I've collected enough experiences learning things the hard way that if I can share them and shortcut the process for others, I'd love to do that.
That's awesome. And I'm going to ask you the questions in inverse. So you said learn the hard way. It's what made me think of it. We usually talk about superpowers and flops, or things you're less good at, things you suck at. What do you think is a good example of something you've learned the hard way?
I'll put that in the context with my superpower
good.
As well.
Okay.
Since those two kind of, I view for most people, and I interview folks this way, that mm-hmm. what we're really good at is the flip side is what we're not so good at.
I totally agree. It's like a coin.
It's a two heads of a coin, right? Mm-hmm. So whatever you're really good at is usually the source of what you're not so good at.
Yes.
That's just the way we're wired. So, my superpower is around synthesis. I can sit in a meeting where lots of people are arguing and debating and sharing different things, and usually pretty quiet in the process. And near the end of the meeting, when it's like, okay, what we said was A, B, C, and D, and therefore we should do E, and they go, yes. And that I thought was something everybody could do. Turns out wasn't necessarily the case. And so once I realized that is some value that I can add, I consciously then try to do that. And that's the approach I took in writing the book was, let me go talk to 50 great CMOs, hear what they have to say. And out of that, patterns emerged, and the structure of the book was basically a synthesis of in the patterns that they told me about. And so, that was a lot of fun to be able to do and recognize, okay, that's something that is not a characteristic that everybody's got. The flip side of that is, how do I express it and turn it especially into tools, like PowerPoint or visual? And it's like, I can conceptualize the idea, I can get it down, but doing the nitty gritty work of getting things on the paper is not my forte. And so it's nice to have, associates in the consulting business that can help do that, or find folks on a creative team that know how to, bring ideas to life. And so I can get the core ideas organized, but I'd like to have partners that can then bring those ideas to life.
I'm with you, man. I can see it on the page. I just literally cannot physically put it there. I'm like, what? You can't all see what I'm seeing in my head? How come not? That's so weird.
Yeah, I can draw something, an idea, and I can get it down on a blank sheet of paper and draw it. But then, it's not ready for prime time.
Everything that comes after that is a little bit more challenging. Yep. I totally feel you. And I really appreciate the people who work alongside of me who can help me fill in all the blanks too. So how about some of the CMOs that you interviewed for the book? I'm really curious who some of them are, if you want to highlight them. What are they up to today? Do you think we should have any of them as guests on our show?
Sure.
For those who are listening who haven't read the book yet, share with us.
Yeah, the opening chapter, Jim Stengel was the opening story, and he got alignment with his CEO at P&G about the changes that they were trying to make, and there's been many others about that. I was just working on something for a board application that I was filling in, and the one of the challenges that organization has is, creating a great guest experience. And one of the CMOs at the time was from Taco Bell, and shared that the guest experience will never be better than the employee experience. And so how important it is to nurture the team and, bring them along and make sure that they feel excited about coming to work and don't wear lousy uniforms in the case of Taco Bell.
Chick-fil-A definitely got them there.
Yeah. So anyways, they changed their uniforms and did things to make people feel like they were proud to show up at Taco Bell, and that helped with what they were trying to do. But anyways, there are lots of those little stories. I don't like to read dense books, so I didn't want to write one. And so there's 12 tenets of the manifesto, and each one is a chapter, and it starts with a story, typically, CMO and what they did. The former CMO of Miller Coors was sharing one of the stories that I thought was really interesting, and said he was new to the role and getting ready to show up to the organization and meet his team, and his executive assistant said, I'm happy to set that up for you. I think it'd be great if you could share your marketing philosophy. And he thought, wow, that's kind of a presumptuous request from my EA. But I said, I get the idea, but I probably have one, but I haven't really. What
is my marketing philosophy?
I haven't really codified it. And I thought, that was pretty interesting. And so I've seen others that as they get ready to share their agenda with their teams, that ability to codify things that are important to them, the principles that they live with. Peter Horst was the CMO of Capital One, and he shared Peter's principles. And
nice. Nice little alliteration.
Yeah, it was great. And it includes like no egos. You know? So we're going to have an organization, and if you want a big ego, this isn't the place for you. So, things like that were really great to pick up. Yeah,
that's great. So what's your marketing philosophy? Can I ask you that? I guess I can. I did. Do you want to answer that question? What's your marketing philosophy?
I would say core to my marketing philosophy as I work on marketing strategies for clients and help with things is start with the customer. And unfortunately, especially in technology organizations, medical device companies, others, it's so often that I just want to tell you about how good my product is. And all the marketing is centered around that. And sometimes reflects the fact that marketing is kind of positioned as a support organization to the product teams. And so that's the way they go about it. But I think my philosophy is that when you flip that lens and instead of your role being one to sell, your role is to help people buy. And put the customer at the center and the starting point of the planning. And if you can get that insight and empathy about what motivates them, then you can connect the value proposition that you're trying to communicate. So that's probably underlying a lot of how I think about marketing.
I love what you just said. Your role as a CMO is not to sell things to people, it's to help them buy. That's amazing. It's so simple, but that's so awesome.
It really changes how you think about what you're trying to do, and I think makes you a lot more effective.
Yes, and it almost, it changes the way, like if literally like the coin that we talked about, you're flipping it on its head. It's like, how can I aid the customer? How can I make it such that they want to buy my product?
That's right.
That's a beautiful way of thinking about it. Thank you for sharing that. That is awesome. And having spent much of your time in brand strategy, I'm wondering, what are the ways that you think are the most magical in terms of really uncovering strong understanding about your customer and their perspective? Can you share some of the methodologies or things that you read or a to-do list that you think people should have if they're, trying to learn more about their audience or a new audience? What do you think should be included?
I think the capability to start with deep listening, empathetic listening, just really try to understand within your ideal customer how they think, what's their life, what are they going through, how does this decision fit into their day? Is it a big deal? Is it not a big deal? What are the challenges that they're trying to deal with? And the more that you can uncover that through their natural conversations, and there's techniques to do that, either through qualitative research, through social listening, through analyzing search terms. There's just lots of techniques that you can use. But the heart of it is, how do I get under the covers, and into their head of who they are and how they think, and therefore sets the foundation for how I can best connect with them.
Yeah. And I saw in your notes that LinkedIn is a tool that you feel like we shouldn't live without. And what you're saying just made me think of a study that I saw that someone shared with me from LinkedIn, published a couple of years ago, that even shows that in B2B marketing now, emotional messaging makes the buyer more likely to buy than functional messaging, right? I think in B2B.
I think that's the biggest misconception about B2B marketing. It's business to business, and there are folks that advocate it's really human to human.
Yes, brain to brain.
Yeah, and that's so true. It's you're trying to move or motivate or change perceptions of a person, or in the B2B context, sometimes multiple people on the decision committee.
Yeah,
and if you remember that no matter how rational we think we are, all decisions are ultimately emotional decisions. How can I minimize risk of this decision? How can I be a hero? And you'll have an emotional reaction and kind of preference on how to do that. And then typically the rational components are there to justify that decision. And so part of building a solid brand is creating relevance and that ability to connect to things that are important to them. And in the way that Profit has done its recent brand relevance study has gotten to measuring the heart and the head elements of brand. And so, whether it's consumer or B2B, don't just focus on the head. You've got to get to the heart as well.
Absolutely. Are there any brands that you think are doing that particularly well right now? Or to rephrase the question, brands that you think have such a deep understanding of their customer that it makes them hyper relevant?
Well, Apple has done that masterfully over
timelessly.
The years. Yep.
To use your word.
Yeah, that's right. And they end up at the top of the brand relevance study just because they score well on both the heart and the head scores. Peloton, before it kind of had some of its operational issues, had very high scores, very great connections, building a community. That's what I did this morning when I woke up. Is I got on my Peloton and did my ride. Kicked my own butt. Well, I actually got the help of one of the instructors to do that. But I remember when I first saw the Peloton come out at CES. I don't know when was it, 10 years ago. I said, I don't know what
the Peloton and the CMO Manifesto. The same time.
Pretty close. And so they really understood their audience. And at the time, they grew through a lot of working women who didn't have the time to go to the gym because they had the kids. And it's like, so I can get on, I can get on the Peloton and ride for 30 minutes at home. But for me to go to the gym to do that just isn't going to happen. And so that insight into who they were trying to connect with and how they built the community and the instructors that they collect and how that all developed, built a very strong brand and connected really, really well.
That's right. And that's something that stays relevant for a long time, right? There are presumably always people who are needing to cram a workout in and have children or other responsibilities, right? So that's an example of a timeless insight, right?
And when COVID hits and I can't go to the gym,
that made it even more.
That's when I bought mine. It's like
absolutely, me too.
I had the time, but I couldn't go to the gym anymore. So
absolutely.
They grew so fast through that recognition that they had something, and the word of mouth was really strong from friends to say, okay, it's time. I'm going to drop my gym membership because I can't go. Get my Peloton. But then when they exploded and couldn't handle things operationally, that then became a little bit of a backlash to them.
Different story.
Yeah,
I feel you. I appreciate that. I do my Peloton. My 7-year-old's drawing next to me on the floor.
That's great.
It's very efficient.
That's everybody wins.
No childcare required. It works for everyone. Yep. So, wow. I wonder if you want to share, if you'd like, what you did before you were in marketing, because we talk a lot on this show about how that informs our career, and not necessarily what we do in our career, but how we approach it, how we're thoughtful around questions, building teams, tackling problems. And so I'm curious if you want to share what you did before you did this.
There were 2 things that I did before I got into marketing that influenced how I think about marketing and how I lead teams. My first job out of grad school was selling computers for IBM. So I carried a bag, great training, but the lessons from that were I was in front of customers and heard how they thought and the questions that they asked and the objections and the and so I was getting into their heads, on how they made decisions.
Forced curiosity.
Exactly. And so that experience informed, again, back to how I think about marketing and why the customer is so important. And if marketers had that experience to spend time with customers.
Yes.
And, in my case, I spent 5 years doing that as the first part of my career. So I think it helped me build this foundation that marketing's role is to help sell, but the way you go about it is to help the customer on the other side make a buying decision. So that came from my first job.
Yeah.
My previous job, my college job, was as a swim team coach. I grew up swimming competitively, and then for 3 summers, my summer job was to coach a community swim team, about 100 kids. And I realized that I got as much enjoyment and probably more enjoyment out of seeing the kids succeed than I did out of my own successes. And whether it was one girl who won a city championship or her younger brother who was 5 and he finally completed his full 1 lap in a swim meet, for the first time. And I remember him at the end, it's like, what was my time? And, that, but just the fact that he could finish a lap was success for him. And he was so thrilled about it. And it's like, I get a lot of great feedback in being a coach and a mentor. And, through my career, I've tried to do the same kind of thing. It's like, I enjoy helping other people be successful. And, that came a lot from that first job.
So, John, you mentioned that at the time of writing your book, which was 10 years ago, you said, that CMO turnover was at an all-time high. And we've been talking a lot about that on the show because there's been tons of press in the last year or two about turnover. So what was it then? What is it now? Why do you think it is what it is? I'm curious for you to unpack that topic for us.
Yeah, I think it's still in right now, plus or minus 3 years. And it's one of my favorite questions because it's deceiving in that there are 3 major reasons why I found there's CMO turnover. One, the CMO didn't succeed.
Sorry.
And a lot of times that was not the CMO's fault, but it was a mismatch, misaligned expectations. They were brought in to solve a brand problem, and the problem was the product sucked or whatever. And so I couldn't fix that problem because that really wasn't the fundamental reason the business isn't doing well. And
right.
So they get blamed, and it's like, okay, we need a change here. So, and sometimes there's change in executive leadership, and they'll make a change, in terms of the CMO as well. So that's the first one. It's like it didn't work out. The second one is it did work out, and they get promoted and move into a chief growth officer or chief commercial officer or some higher level role because what they did really understood the business and understood the customers and understood how to drive revenue. And they were rewarded by becoming president or some other role. And I've seen that quite a bit where a great CMO, but it counts as turnover at the CMO role because they're no longer in the CMO role. But it was because of a successful outcome. And then the third, and I think one that's very common, is they came in, they had a mission, they were trying to affect change, they got their strategy in place, they executed it for 2 or 3 cycles in terms of annual plans, the results were great, and now I'm bored. I need a new challenge. I had one CMO describe it as, I love to build houses, I don't like to maintain them. And I think back to this attribute that CMOs are inherently curious people. It's like it's just the status quo. It's like and so I think there's longer tenure in dynamic businesses where there's new challenges that the business brings on.
Sure.
But in a stable company where I came in, I got things done. Now I'm ready for a change. So all those factors I think cover up this misconception that the CMO is always a target. It's not always the case.
And you said it's about 3 years right now, the average tenure. And what was it 10 years ago?
It was under 30 months, in fact, approaching 24 months, I think, at the time.
Yeah.
So I think it's gotten a lot better. There's a lot more clarity on what a CMO can or can't be or should or shouldn't do. But there are distinctly different types of CMOs, and I think it's important for companies to understand the kind of CMO that they need and the characteristics that they have, and what are the levers at their control, and getting all of those things aligned. We're getting better at it as an industry, and hopefully that's improving the odds of success. And more of the turnover will be because they did a great job and they moved up, or they did a great job and now they're off to the next challenge.
It's like that coin again. Both sides of the coin. Turnover can be because of something good too.
That's right.
Thank you for sharing that perspective. Mm-hmm. Thank you for being with us today.
Well, thanks for having me. This is always fun, and best of luck with the show. It's a great community out there, and I appreciate you adding value back to the CMO community, and I just wish you all the best with this show.
Thank you.